Hey, welcome back to the Ping Pong Flix Show. My name is Chris Wong. This is episode 371 of the Ping Pong Flix Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, let's get to a very small update to the Suicide Squad. This is coming from comicbook.com. Apparently, James Gunn had put out a picture on Instagram that he got to visit Clint Eastwood on his set. And he said this: "Thanks for inviting us into your home, Clint. I'll try and take a little bit of that serenity as I walk into the explosions and falling structures of the Suicide Squad," he wrote on social media platform. Now, as we all know, James Gunn is hard at work on the new movie, though that's coming at the expense of his plan for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. While some fans were hopeful that the movie's official announcement would be revealed at San Diego Comic-Con 2019, the project only received a cursory mention by Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige. Of course, that means the director and writer took to the social media to say that the movie he's working on right now and he plans to finish before even going to the Guardians of the Galaxy world again is the Suicide Squad. And now at least maybe just a little bit of hint of what to expect from the Suicide Squad. Yes, I believe it's still going to be a smaller film, but it kind of excites me to hear that there are going to be explosions. There are going to be falling structures in the Suicide Squad. It could has really telling of some type of epic battle that would probably take place. It's not very enclosed. It's probably very large in that sense, maybe in the third act, but that's all just speculation, and he could just be saying that to make it sound a lot more exciting. But from what come to expect now in this post Guardians of the Galaxy James Gunn, I think there's going to be some epic things in the Suicide Squad. So hopefully we'll get to check out a teaser trailer pretty soon, coming next year. Next up is an opinion piece from Deadline Hollywood, and I think this is kind of a something to think about actually. The title of the Deadline article is this: "New God's Dilemma. DC's Darkseid is a dead ringer for Marvel's Thanos." Now, for a lot of people who know a little bit about the history between Darkseid and Thanos, actually do know that Thanos is actually a copy of DC's Darkseid, but in this sense, it's kind of reversed if you kind of think about it, and it goes into detail in this article. The person in the article did do his research. He does say he does know, or he or she does know, that the Darkseid actually was first and Thanos was second in terms of the comic books. But what he's trying to say is that in general audience's eyes, who watches the movies, who doesn't know anything about comic books, and they're just coming into knowing about the material and the properties of DC and Marvel through the movies, we'll see that depiction and we'll see that kind of similarities between, hey, that guy is Thanos, and that guy is Darkseid, and we've seen Thanos first, Darkseid after, and that Darkseid kind of looks like Thanos, or kind of has that persona of like Thanos, and that's in the general audience eyes. Comic book lovers and fans everywhere who are very in depth into DC and Marvel will know the truth, that Darkseid actually came first, but it doesn't matter because the general audiences are going in blind. They're totally blind. They don't even know a lot of this material. Now, it could be that they read up on Thanos and Darkseid ahead of time, but for the most part, most mainstream audiences don't know that, and so it is telling on how they will perceive, and wondering how they will perceive Darkseid once we see him either in New Gods or hopefully the eventual release of the Snyder Cut. But either way, I think the way Darkseid comes across in the DC is definitely different from Marvel's Thanos. So a possibility that the way the character is written and how it's portrayed in the movies will definitely be something that's separate from the Marvel's Thanos. In a way, the movies are leading up or not even leading up, or just having him appear would probably feel a lot different from how the lead up is in the Marvel's Avengers, from the first Avengers all the way to Infinity War and Endgame. So I think that wouldn't be so much of a problem. It may be in social media, and we'll have a lot of interesting conflicts about that. But for most part, I think the general audience would just go in watching and just eat it up, and that's about it. Without even, they may have that little bit where they're like, did we already see this, kind of like a Thanos kind of character? And then hopefully they'll hit the comic books or go to Wikipedia or something to learn a little bit more about the differences between Darkseid and Thanos. So there is that. Am I excited for Darkseid and New Gods? In terms of Ava DuVernay being the director, not that excited. But the concept of New Gods, pretty excited. And hopefully with the help of Tom King, they can actually fulfill something pretty grandiose and epic, something that is maybe more spectacular than what I'm actually thinking in my head. And if they're able to pull that off, then that's awesome. If they can't, well, let's see the other Darkseid that Snyder made. How's that? But in any case, Warner Brothers is an interesting studio, and WarnerMedia and AT&T. This Forbes article is definitely very interesting, and it's called "Where Does DC Fit in AT&T's Vision for WarnerMedia?" When you go and read the article, and I'll put the article in the link in the description below, it kind of talks about how they're not really looking at, they're not really interested in comic book publishing, especially their own comic book publisher, DC. And it's very telling at Comic-Con, where the booth is smaller, it's towards the back, it's not even out there. The marketing is not that great. Some people say it's very foreboding, and it seems like they're kind of short-sighted or not recognizing DC's publishing side, because a lot of people use DC publishing in order to actually see how the market is reacting to certain characters, to certain pieces, and also using that to actually make the other entertainment side, which is TV shows and movies. I think it's lacking in that fundamental realization that they could use it as kind of researching on this and making movies on this side, and actually branding it all together, putting it all together. I mean, Superman logo, the Batman logo, the Green Lantern, they're all recognizable logos, Flash even as well. And so I think if they're not tapping into the DC comic book publishing side, they're not really investing into the characters and the superheroes, which is kind of concerning in that aspect, right? I mean, you want them to be strong in DC Comics, at the same time using that to make your other entertainment side stronger. And if they're not doing that, they're kind of losing sight of it in general. And hopefully that doesn't mean, that means the movies and the TV series, shows and stuff like that will get less and less of DC based and more, broader than what we want them to, which is not a bad thing, because we want them to make broad types things. But I guess the losing focus on DC Comics is kind of concerning for people who are very invested, like myself, in DC based films and entertainment in general. But there is an article from Variety.com, and it's a look into the CEO John Stankey's action-oriented approach to reposition of WarnerMedia. And it's a long article, so I'm not going to bore you to death with everything on here. But I want to take out a few things that are kind of interesting and could relate to the DCEU or any DC-based entertainment coming out of the new WarnerMedia Entertainment. When John Stankey actually said this in this article, and he said this: if you're going to be relevant in entertainment distribution moving forward, you're going to have a scaled product that gets into the most households. So that we already know about that. We know that what he's referring to is HBO Max. This is their intent. This is their main focus in terms of entertainment. They want to get into the households, who want to tap into the Netflix business, to the Amazon business, to the YouTube business even. So they are trying to get that route. But there was a period of adjustment. Toby Emmerich, chairman of Warner Brothers Pictures Group, admits to being wary of a boss he now praises as smart and thoughtful. I thought this was interesting. For me, John is a textbook example of don't judge a book by its cover, says Emmerich. I was guilty of that. I found myself apprehensive in those first few meetings with him. Of course, there's this physical presence with that deep baritone and his long tenure and success in an industry I knew almost nothing about, other than once calling AT&T customer service to upgrade to the family plan. But John made a significant effort to get to know me and our motion picture group, starting out with a lot of listening. And it almost sounds like he may have given Toby Emmerich a little bit of a hard time. But starting out, like you said, he started off with listening, and any good boss will start listening, trying to see how everything works. Then his call to action is like, you know what? I think this is not working. Let's do this. Let's fix this. I don't think this is working. Let's fix this. So I think a lot of it, because a lot of the biggest money making businesses in motion pictures, along with all the other stuff, he's very much in tune with Warner Brothers and trying to get that to work, trying to get a lot more profitability out of that. So at present, Warner Brothers makes roughly 20 films a year. Stankey believes the number could rise to as many as 30 movies annually, which would make it the most prolific among the major studios. He says we can do more, says Stankey. He notes that the amortization cushion provided by HBO Max will enable the company to take bets on dramas, thrillers, and other genres that are becoming an endangered species in a movie business obsessed with comic book movies and big budget fantasies. The tentpole franchise dynamic has squeezed a lot of stuff out of theatrical production, says Stankey. This is going to allow some things to come in that more super serve various niches in the customer base. Now, the one thing you probably are hearing from this is that the people are obsessed with comic book movies and big budget fantasies, and is that something they're going away from? I think that's not what they're trying to say. I think they're trying to add to that plate. So, for instance, if they make roughly 20 films a year, and a lot of that is that big budget, big comic book movies, then they're going to increase that by 10 movies to 30 movies annually, and able to add in these other types of genres, which is dramas, thrillers, and other different types of genres that are what he considers endangered species. So that's a great thing. I think that diversifies the movie theaters a little bit, and it's not just filled with comic book movies and big budget fantasies, which a lot of people tend to appreciate. But as we've seen in box office right now, having them closely knit together along with other major studios like, I don't know, Disney, it kind of really makes it hard for the people to get to the theaters. And so you'll see a lot of those box office returns, and unfortunately a lot of non-Disney films start to make less and less money because people are choosing what to watch. They're choosing the movies that they want to watch, and if it's marketed well, then they'll go ahead and watch it. So I think in terms of people who want to enjoy other types of takes on the movies other than comic book movies, then they'll kind of can get into this. But I think they also could mean that when he's talking about comic book movies, it could be like the black labels. There's different takes using comic book type DC publishing type movies, and like Joker, and they could actually expand on that. So we'll see different stories that doesn't have to be interconnected. And if it's anything like what they're doing with the DC animated stuff, where they have some of those smaller stories that they want to tell, they don't need that big budgets. I think that could also work in favor of WarnerMedia, Warner Brothers altogether. It's something different from what Marvel is doing. But in relation to Marvel, they're also kind of going to that HBO Max route. Marvel has the tentpole movies, and they also have the Disney Plus type movies or series. I don't know what they'll call that, Loki and other ones that they're doing as well. So that's them taking them head on in a way. But hopefully it's not in a copying factor, which I don't think so, but it is trying to get that business as well. But it takes creative talent to get that business. And so Stankey has also had a crash course in the talent relations component of his job. He took the lead in hammering out a mega deal with Star Wars The Force Awakens director and Alias creator J.J. Abrams that will see the filmmaker helm movies and shows for Warner's various platforms. Stankey flew to London in September to begin talks with Abrams, pitching him on WarnerMedia's ability to offer him a broad array of homes for his content. From traditional theatrical releases to streaming and video games, the pact is believed to be valued at least $500 million. And while Stankey doesn't confirm a deal has been reached, he heaps praise on Abrams. He says, I'm action oriented. I have a bias to wanting to move forward, not to contemplate and evaluate. So that is crazy. That's awesome. Why somebody like JJ is so interesting to us is because they're incredibly creative and accomplished at what they do, and that they have this great curiosity about wanting to do things across different platforms, said Stankey. Try different things, work on different technologies to see if new formats can be developed. What's interesting about J.J. Abrams, because a little bird told me that in a lot of the DGA rules, there's this part where it says final cut authority, meaning that person has the authority to make changes and do whatever it takes to get to that final cut. 90, maybe even 99% of the time, that final cut authority does not go to the director. It's actually the studio or the producer. But J.J. Abrams always has final cut authority because he's that type of director. I gotta believe even people like Steven Spielberg has that final cut authority, and James Cameron has that final cut authority. J.J. Abrams is one of those gentlemen, and for him to be in Warner Brothers lot making the films that he wants to make, that is almost completely director driven, and I think that is a great thing moving forward for people who want that director driven studio and possibly some crazy DC Comics types movies. And I'm really positive people are like, well, it doesn't mean he's gonna make a DC movie, but come on, JJ, you know, he's a nerd at heart. He is definitely going to make a DC movie. It's just a matter of what movie and when. But that's not all. He also, a WarnerMedia chief, John Stankey, also tapped in Michael B. Jordan, and the Creed star whose Outlier Productions recently signed a first look deal with Warner Brothers. So Jordan is particularly impressed with him. He said this: John makes WarnerMedia a place where artists have creative freedom, not just around subject matter, but across platforms, said Jordan. That forward-thinking model and his openness to different perspectives and points of view was a big part of what solidified my commitment to expanding Outlier Society's partnership with the organization. So as you see, it is it's seemingly more that John Stankey is more open to the creative side, which I like when I read this article. Hopefully this is not just a face, and it's actually being done that way. And I think for us who were trying to fight for creative freedom and director-driven films, I think we should be happy with this. It might not be particularly saying that Zack Snyder can come back, but it may lay an environment for Zack Snyder to come back. It may not be a DC movie, but it could be a movie that Zack Snyder wants to make. So as for the creative side of the media company's business, prolific film and TV producer Greg Berlanti, who has a mammoth overall deal at Warner Brothers that runs through 2024, says getting to know Stankey has been an education. He's given me a greater sense of the lay of the land. As a creative person, I'm looking for stability and leadership so I can just worry about making the best shows possible. John is an incredibly commanding and thoughtful leader. And so Stankey may not be intimately familiar with the creative community, but he knows how important the work that comes from Berlanti and his peers it is to products AT&T wants to market around the world. I do not lose sleep at night worrying about creative direction around here. Our challenge will be getting that great creative strength and marrying it with great technology and the ability to manage customer life cycles. If we can get that three-legged stool working, then we're unstoppable. So that is key. That's what they want to do. They want to be able to get these creatives to making content, varied content, if you will, for AT&T, and putting that content in many different platforms so they can actually profit from all types of areas. So I think this is a great business decision. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out into actual projects and actual goals and things like that. But I am interested to see this new direction of WarnerMedia Group, this new direction they want to tap into HBO Max. And I'm excited actually, because even though it may not be the DCEU, there's still hope for that. But even though it might not be that, we're going to get more varied content, including things like DC Universe and more DC-based shows and things like that. And so that's something to be excited for, especially if you're a big fan of DC Comics and DC World. Even though it seems like they're not paying too much attention to DC Comics and publishing, but hopefully when the success of these TV shows and movies for DC, it will kind of reinvigorate the DC Comics publishing side, and people will finally get back into being interested in DC properties. Even though DC Comics I think is still outselling Marvel. Hopefully, WarnerMedia, AT&T, Warner Brothers can get DC back into the open, back into the minds of the public and the mainstream audiences, and at the same time satisfying fans who were there from the beginning with DCEU, and hopefully we'll get varied product, including the DCEU and new DC based films. All right, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.